Hi, mystery writers. Welcome to Write a Killer Mystery, where we learn to make a good mystery great. And in the past, I've talked a lot about hiding your clues so your reader doesn't notice them. And today, I'm going to talk about a completely different way to use clues in your mystery. I call it power clues, powering up your clues. Um, First, I want to thank my patrons on Patreon for their continued support of this series and my writing. So, without further ado, let's look at how to use clues to build suspense in your mystery novel. I think, especially for beginning writers, you plant those clues in there and you want to make sure that it's hard for your reader to remember the clues because um, they're important and they are leading toward the reveal of the villain at the end. But today I'm going to take a completely different look at using clues so you don't have too many of them. If you have too many clues, your reader is going to be confused and it's going to be too much for your reader. So I want you to think of how clues work with your reader, how they work in your reader's brain. Um, Clues essentially plant questions in your reader's mind. They're like the setup for a payoff later in your story. Um, and because they raise questions in your reader's mind, that is the power that the clue has. And you can play around with that power. And we're going to talk about that today. Because when you plant a clue in your story, your reader looks at the clue and they ask a question. Well, is that significant? Or should I remember that? How does that relate to the crime? Um, what, or does it even relate to the crime? Or uh, if you have a list of things in a room that are clues, which one of those is the real clue? Those are all questions that come up in your reader's mind, and this is good. You always want your reader asking questions because questions create anticipation. At some point, it's going to be revealed whether this clue is significant or not, right? And because of that anticipation, they build tension in your reader's mind about your story. And tension is what gets readers to keep reading. Um, you reader wants to know how their questions will be answered or even if their questions will be answered, and they have to keep reading in order to find out. So your job as the mystery writer, when using your clues, is to raise those questions. You don't want your clues so insignificant and hidden that they your reader doesn't even think about them, even if it's only for that very moment. Even if it's only for that very moment when you plant the clue. So let's go back a little and think about what is a clue? What is a clue in a mystery? In a mystery story, a clue is anything that points the detective to the killer. So that's pretty simple, right? And the reason we think about hiding the clues is we don't want to reveal too early what that clue's connection to the villain is. All right, but meanwhile, we've got several hundred pages to play around with the clues. So, um, as a writer constructing your story, you have endless possibilities to plant and hide clues along your storyline as the story progresses. And as you outline your plot and brainstorm ideas for what clues would lead your detective towards solving the puzzle, you get lots of ideas. So, here's some ideas. This will help you if you're brand new to mystery writing. Here's some ideas to get you started. Physical items the victim left behind. letters, notes, notebooks, keepsake, tickets, ticket stubs, emails, text messages, a purse, a favorite can opener in the kitchen. It doesn't matter. There's so many things that you can make and turn into a clue. Um, Another way is dialogue with suspects, um, and voicemail recordings, conversations with your detective, overheard conversations, dialogue with the detective's opponent or love interest. There's just so many ways that you can plant the clues in your story. And even hearsay and gossip can hide grains of truth that are clues. So you have a lot to play with. And another way that you can come up with clues is with background. Um, there may be cultural paradigms in the victim's world that make sense within the victim's world, but your sleuth isn't really familiar with the victim's world, all right? Um, when the victim is in a specialized world, your detective may need to know about the world in order for the piece, that clue, to even make sense. So that's why the very first half of your story is often about the detective discovering and investigating the victim's world. How does the victim's world make sense? Okay? So you can think of Dick Francis and horse racing. Um, but it could be anything from gambling underworld to flower shows to dog breeding or sailing or deep water diving or spiritual cults. You get the idea. And I know if you have watched any, especially British TV detective series, you know how that victim world, kind of an overview for each episode in the series. All right. So, once again, clues are anything the detective learns that points them toward resolving the mystery. So, when you first plant those clues in your story, the detective and your reader may not understand how those clues are important or even if they are important. For instance, if your detective is going into your victim's room, for example, they could see a lot of things in that room, but only certain things in that room are going to be actual clues that help your detective solve the mystery. Okay, so what I want to emphasize today is how you can elaborate on those questions that come up in your reader's mind so you can keep them guessing, okay? So each clue your sleuth discovers in a mystery foreshadows that final revelation. Um, but the mystery writer has a challenge, and that's how to plant the clues without giving away the villain before the end. And so you kind of want to foreshadow without foreshadowing. At the same time, each clue is a setup for a revelation later in the story. And today I want to talk about the many revelations that can happen. So, if your reader remembers a clue, they wonder how it points to the villain, right? And rather than leave clues sitting, you can elaborate on the question raised in your reader's mind the first time they encounter the clue. So, just as you plant a clue as a potential setup, maybe early in the story, you can elaborate on clues by mentioning them again, but in a totally different light. So you're raising the questions in the reader's mind all over again. All right, and just to reiterate, the questions build suspense, and the suspense and tension make the reader want to keep reading. So, how do we do this? So, I'll give you some examples. Um, your sleuth compares the clues to other clues, or a suspect says they left the clue, or they left the clue somewhere else. So, how did it get where the detective found it? Um, um, or your detective, especially this happens in law enforcement, your detective receives hard evidence that makes the clue seem like a red herring. So now there's a question, well, does this clue even make sense or not? And it's up to you as the story creator whether it is a red herring, or if you just don't know the sleuth doesn't know the full picture yet. Or a clue that was present earlier in the story physically disappears. To go back to look at the clue a second time or even a third time, it's gone, it's missing. So, what happened? Do you see how these start raising questions for your reader? Um, and we haven't added any new clues, we're just looking at clues in a different way. So, a couple more. So, a supporting character like a sidekick or a mentor or a love interest uh, looks at the clue in a new way, some way that your detective hadn't even thought of. And they're just like, out of their mouth comes this new way of looking at the clue. And another way, as new clues emerge, the original clue becomes part of a plan or part of a pattern. So, those are ways that you can reintroduce a clue and still raise questions in your reader's mind. And each time you elaborate on the clue's significance, you're raising new questions for your reader. So, I just want to emphasize that questions equal suspense. Um, if you drop a clue once, you raise a question. But when you reintroduce the clue in a new light, you heighten the suspension for your reader, the suspense. That, like, oh, wait, they may have even forgotten about that clue. It happened 150 pages earlier, and lots of things have happened since then. And now all of a sudden, here's this clue pops up again, but it's a scene in a new light, like the ones I just described. And so new questions pop up in your reader's head. And when you reintroduce that clue with a new interpretation, you create a new setup for your reader to ask more questions. And now, once again, your reader wants to know what significance the clue has in the mystery puzzle. Uh, so I hope this helps uh, thinking about your clues, so you don't have to, you can reintroduce a clue. It's not that you have to drop it in once and then just leave it there and hope your reader remembers 290 pages later that you dropped that clue in on page 30. So you can bring up your clues again. Just shift the perspective on the clue to raise more questions for your reader. And once again, too many clues can clutter up your story and confuse your reader. So that's why I was thinking about this. It's better to um, bring back a clue that you introduced earlier in your story and just cast it in a new light than introducing a brand new clue. Because now your reader has to rethink, just like your detective has to rethink how to interpret that clue and what does it really mean. Um, and the, you've essentially built more power into that clue that you put in your story, and that power is to pique your reader's curiosity. So, so this is just an idea of building multi-layered clues. You introduce it once, and it may not even seem significant. You reintroduce it later in your story, but now it has a different significance, which may increase or decrease depending on what's happening in your story. But you don't have to come up with a brand new clue. You just look at that original clue in a whole new way, and build suspense for your reader, and you keep them turning pages. So I hope that helps. That's a little bit advanced. If you're brand new to mystery writing and you have an idea in your head, um, I encourage you to check out my course, Write a Killer Mystery. It walks you through all the steps. And also, right now until April 15th, you can use the discount code SPRING22 um, to get 25% off and get started on your mystery so that you begin and you work into some of these advanced craft techniques. And I'm really happy to report that one of the students in Write a Killer Mystery just published her mystery this week, and I read it yesterday. It's a cozy mystery. It's really a lot of fun. So that uh, just want to say that the course really helps you go from story idea, which is what she had at the beginning, to writing the end of your story. Okay, I hope that helped. Multi-layered clues, and keep writing, and I'll see you next week.